GMT, good morning, Tobago. And yes, I know you see me on a Friday, but it is Thursday, so don't be confused. Chanel will join you tomorrow morning and she will take us through the paces for the weekend. But yes, it is Thursday. I'm your host this morning, Natalie Sealy-Richardson, and we continue, of course, talking about the budget presentation laid before us by Councillor Petalon Roberts. Joining me this morning is Dr. Denise Tsoiafatt-Angus. Of course, we know that many different persons from different industries and faiths have been commenting, and of course, we would like to hear her perspective this morning. So I, invite you to pay attention and let's have this discussion with her this morning. She's the political leader of the IDA, the Innovative Democratic Alliance, and of course, it's always a pleasure to have you, Dr. Denise.
Good morning, Natalie. Good morning to the rest of Tobago and wherever you are touching in from, viewing, listening. Good morning.
And of course, the Secretary for Finance presented a $3.7 billion wish list. We may say it's an ask list because we know here in Tobago, for those who are not familiar, when the Secretary of Finance presents and we call it a budget, but it's really like a wishful budget. We still have to wait on central government to allocate the figure, and then the T.H.A will then make revisions and work along with the monies sent to us by central government. So this 3.7 billion wish list, for those of you who would have listened, read headlines, read summaries of what was presented, would have your own opinions. You may like it, not like it, want to tweak it, and that's fair enough. And as I mentioned earlier, we have Dr. Denise Tsoiafatt-Angus who will share with us. And as we get into this discussion, Dr. Denise, I want, before we get into more details, 6 areas were highlighted as target points for capital investment, right? Agriculture, infrastructure, digital technologies, human capital development, which includes education and training, and micro, small, and medium enterprises, right? So these 6 are the target areas for capital investments. And I just want to start off there because it covers a lot of what Tobagonians talk about, whether we are happy with where things are, where we want to see Tobago go. Are you satisfied that these are the 6 key areas identified for capital investment? And if not, what would you have liked to see make that 6-point list?
Okay, so let me first of all congratulate the Secretary of Finance for her maiden speech, being the first female Secretary of Finance. I know that, for women in leadership, it is not easy to achieve those, to have those achievements. So hats off to her. Congratulations. I think for me, when I think about the overview of the budget, we cannot just look at, okay, what are the 6 things? I think we need to have a proper assessment. It's like when somebody goes to the doctor, you don't just expect the doctor to look at you and say, okay, that. You want a full assessment to hear all the things that are not correct. And then is when you make the diagnosis, then is when you provide the treatment. And so I am not clear that we have gotten all the data to make a proper diagnosis of what are the challenges in Tobago and what can we see going forward. So what you have is a prescription for all of these things, but the diagnosis has not been made. And when you look at, what they would have laid out in the budget, you ask yourself if that prescription is real. And I'm going back to the fact that they did not mention in the budget that, they mentioned it, but they didn't truly extrapolate it, that we have a 22% tertiary education, on the island. I mean, some CSO results at the last source said 16%. I don't know, they're saying 22%. Fine. If you have 22% of persons who went to tertiary education, there's also another cadre of 68% that did not receive O levels, only got O levels between 1 and 4 O levels. Okay, so that's 68%. And that number has been increased over the last 2 years. It was 64% in 2023. It's now 68% in 2024, 2025. So it means that you've had a 4% increase in persons not attaining between 1 and 4. And this does not even take into consideration our high school dropouts, those who got less than 1.
Right.
Okay? So it tells you that we are in a bad shape where being able to drive the economy is concerned.
Right.
Everybody keeps talking about Singapore. Yes? And we want to be like Singapore and the model Singapore. Singapore's model is at least 43% of the persons having tertiary education. Now, tertiary education does not mean academic pursuits. You know, it could also mean tertiary education, specialization in any of the skills trainings that we do.
Right.
So you want to have that in order to drive an economy. And therefore, if you understand that is one of the greatest challenges we have, that is also driving low productivity, then you want to look at serious education reform.
Right. And before,
which I don't really see listed.
Right. And
on
before,
that.
I just want to bring you back again, you know, the 6 key areas that were highlighted for capital investment, and I can read them again for the benefit of our viewers: agriculture, infrastructure, digital technologies, human capital development, and the MSMEs, right? So this, although you have, these were the key areas specified for having that capital investment. Is there anything you would have liked to see, you know, being added there, or something that you might have prioritized more? Or do you agree that this 6-point list is okay as it's presented? This was just one of the features of the budget.
Right. So perhaps I'm a little bit clinical at times because of my medical training. I have to be very precise in analysis. Yeah. And so we spoke about education reform.
Right.
Right? Inside of that, you also need human capital development.
Right.
159 million for human capital development is not going to turn around or begin to turn around the challenge we have with the diagnosis we made. You understand? So you're running into all of these other areas, but the one key area that is going to make significant turnaround, we really have not put much into that. Okay? And I really have to admit that I was very disappointed with that 4% increase, because we have 2 teachers at the helm. You have the Secretary of Education, who was a former teacher. You have the Chief Secretary, who was a former teacher. So how can we have that much slippage in the last 2 years of 4%? It means that there's something wrong with the education system. They are not seeing it, whether they don't have the courage or they don't know what needs to take place in it. Something is going awry there.
Right.
Okay? Additionally, we have the decline, the serious decline in the economy. Now, from 2015 to 2021, under the PNM reign, you had a slippage of about 23% of the economy. Under this administration, according to their figures of a 5.9% budget, whereas 80,712 people that they are catering for, that indicates that the decline is now at 13% under this administration in the short 4 years. So we have a serious issue there too.
How do you explain that to the public? Because we've heard that the economy in Tobago experienced a growth in the presentation, and you are saying it actually experienced a decline. So hearing that and then hearing this, how do you explain to our viewers, you know, exactly what you're saying?
Okay, so maybe you got your increase on your salary by 3%, yes, however you got that increase, but then you've had triplets being born. Yeah? Can that money really feed the household? Whereas before you had the increase, you had, maybe one person in the house, two people in the house, and so there's a difference between the GDP as a growth and the GDP per capita. Meaning, does that money trickle down? And it is showing less and less that the money is trickling down to everybody across Tobago. So a certain subset may have experienced the increase, but in terms of the trickle-down effect across Tobago, it's getting worse. And people have seen it. You go to the grocery. I'm sure you have, Natalie. You go to the grocery and you can't buy what you were able to buy a couple of years ago. The money just not going anywhere, So that is how it is explained. And people usually don't look at the gross, GDP. You want to see how did that really affect the man on the street, your average Tobagonian. And the effect is that there's been a 13% decline, and therefore the money cannot pay for all the things. People are struggling to pay for school books, struggling to put food on the table, struggling for transportation, all of these things. And so that is the impact, the sad impact of it.
Mm-hmm. So do you think the money is allocated for agriculture, the 131.9 million, can assist with the figures you've presented? Because as you say, we're spending the money on the food. We know the prices of food, it seems to be going up. With the injection of this money, if received, or part thereof, because I know the secretary would have said, the focus is on food security, agribusiness, innovation, sustainability. So do you think that, the investment there can help alleviate that? If we turn around, you hear a lot of people talk about our food import bill, how that ties to inflation, etc.
So you have to also look at the other three budgets. This is not our first budget. The other three budgets also would have put emphasis on agriculture. What have been the achievements in agriculture in those areas? There's been a further decline in terms of the agricultural sector. So just saying that you're going to put that extra money in agriculture, how is that turning around the sector? Especially when under the development program, you are putting $1.5 million for productivity and generating growth, right? As part of the development. And as part of the development, you put 1.5 million, of which agriculture is a part of that. So it says to me that you're really not sure what you're doing. Because if you're putting 1.5 million, can't begin to touch. If you say you're doing, what is that thing they call them? Oh gosh, the name is slipping me now. They're creating these food or
agri-processing.
The hubs or something like that. That name has slipped me now. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
But if you're putting those together, the mega farms, I'm sorry.
Okay.
You keep touting that we're doing mega farms. Yes, you're going to start these mega farms.
Right.
If you're doing that, it cannot be 1.5 million in the productivity sector under your development program that you're putting in to say you're doing mega farms. I mean, that's child's play. And so you're not getting a sequencing of the budget in terms of how it has been developed, how it has been analyzed to produce what you want. What you have is certain sectors saying, okay, I will be primary this time, you will be primary this time, I'll be primary this time. Here's your money.
Right.
And there's not a coherent look at the whole picture to say what really can drive the Tobago economy, given the challenges that we have with productivity, with undereducation, with a major employment by the government. You know, we are technically a government economy. How do we begin turning that around so that Tobago can grow to the level of prosperity and freedom?
Do you
And
think
that is what we want.
Do you think it can be turned around if central government, whoever sits there, gives Tobago what Tobago asks for? Because of course history would show whatever is asked for, it's not given. So if it is that Tobago gets all it wants, it's just like managing your home. If you get the resources you need, then you can plan better and implement programs. So do you think that might be one of the challenges for whoever may sit at the T.H.A?
The challenge is that we have to take responsibility for where we've fallen short. Yeah? And how we are presenting ourselves. We are not presenting ourselves as people who could stand side by side. We're presenting ourselves as, okay, I need this. It's time that we hold our heads up and we step in there understanding that we are half the country. And if we are half the country, you're stepping in there to say, okay, the country I know has issues. We have to diversify away from oil and gas because that is not taking us anywhere anytime soon. And these are the solutions that we have come up with in Tobago that we really think can benefit the whole country. If you go to the table with that and that stance, you will get a different listening. Because you're not just going, oh, this is the money we want to spend in Tobago. No, you're going knowing and presenting yourself knowing that you are half the country and therefore you are willing to provide solutions that will benefit the whole country.
So you're saying that is not being done?
That's not being done. That's not being done. Because if you're presenting in that way, I mean, who's going to, they have to be really spiteful to look at you and say no. But you have to put the justification because remember, the government also has rules that it has to treat with.
Right.
They would have to go to parliament and debate and defend what they're doing. And so if you present it in that way, it makes their work easier to do, where they can demonstrate, listen, Tobago has this plan. Right? Their projections is that it can create this amount of returns and therefore we agree this could be a true diversification effort that could benefit the whole country. Right now, if you look at our bill, it continues to be a consumption budget. We cannot continue to be a consumption budget, else we will not go anywhere. But we need to know what are some of the things that can begin turning around our returns on an investment.
Right.
And when you do not bring your communities into the discussions, then we're not going anywhere anytime soon. The foundation is the strongest part of your house. Our communities are the strongest part of who we are, and it is time that we involve them in the conversation. I mean, imagine you see on a budget that we have a strategic plan for 2025 to 2045, and it's going to be laid out in June 2020, the end of this June. Do you normally do a strategic plan just by yourself, or do you engage everyone in planning for our future and not just your future?
Right. Two things I just want to ask based on what you would have shared. Let me start with the latter in terms of, because every time we sit together, you're a very strong advocate for involving communities, for consultation, right? And we know consultation did take place for the budget. When you say
special interest
and then the rest of the public was also invited to share their comments. And I know how you feel about that. But let's be practical, because we talk about consultation, and I know, as I mentioned, you're a very strong advocate for involving communities. And I want you to really clarify that for me, because when you talk about consultation and involving communities and everyone, is it that you want to go around village by village? Do you expect that everyone, because even when you do consultations like that, or you invite a community to come. Sandals is coming, we're talking about wetlands, you make a public invitation, some people still will not come, right? So when you talk about consulting everyone, what exactly do you mean?
I mean, going into communities and having meetings, having the village councils drive, bringing the people into meetings and having those conversations. I mean, the consultations on a budget should not begin 3 months before you have to present. It should begin perhaps 2 months after you have presented this budget and gotten the monies. It has to begin then, thinking into the future, projecting into the future, telling people, okay, this is what we have gotten this year, and what are you thinking in terms of long term? But even if you cannot be planning 2025 to 2045, and who understands what you're doing? You can't be planning in isolation. If you do that, because the people are the drivers, are expected to be the drivers of this plan. And if you plan without them, then there's no way it's going to be driven.
But not everybody would be interested in driving that plan. There are some people, and again, I have been to consultations that would have been advertised well in advance. And when you go to that meeting, it's a handful. So one can say that at the end, the community was consulted, and someone else will say, well, only 10 people came out, but you were all invited.
It doesn't matter. You still have a responsibility to go out to the people.
Right.
Have you heard any advertisement for consulting on this strategic plan?
I know meetings were held. I know that the division invited the business sector. They invited
the special interest groups were invited.
And these are the people that may drive the strategic plan.
I don't agree with that.
And that's fine. So that's what I'm just asking you to clarify.
Different people make up communities.
Correct.
And they interlock in different ways in communities.
Right.
And you have to go to those communities and actually have discussions with the people.
Right.
Whether 5 people come out, whether 10 people come out, that's not the issue.
Right.
They cannot say they were not included.
Right.
Yes? And you get a full picture of what the uniqueness of there and what they would want to see.
Right.
Yes? And we can't continue cutting out people saying they're not interested. Else you will continue to have a bunch of uninterested people. But if you're doing this regularly, soon you would realize that people are starting more and more to come out because they trust the process and don't think it's just a political game. Because that is part of it. People think, oh, it's just a political game. But if you're doing it regularly, people begin to trust the process and realize that they could come out and give their views, and their views will be heard.
The other thing I want to raise based on what you said in terms of the presentation coming from Tobago, it's heavily based on consumerism. So this is what we seem not to be bringing. But aren't we boxed in by our constitution in terms of Tobago raising funds? For example, I know that the Tobago House of Assembly would have gotten approval from the IDB for, I think, a US 100,000 grant, but Tobago on itself cannot just access money like this. It has to come through under the umbrella of central government, and whatever paperwork was needed from the then finance minister and from that ministry, it wasn't provided. So that would have, so again, I'm just trying to understand, and just like me, viewers would want to know, when you talk about Tobago not just coming and asking, how can we,
great
stand?
And that's a great point.
Yeah.
Because a budget is presented on not just what you want to spend, but what you intend to get in,
your income
to spend, correct?
Yes.
And therefore, you have to put on this case, because you get it that this government is dealing with secrecy. This T.H.A. is dealing with secrecy, right? You have to bring a budget that says, we are requesting X, from the government. We are bringing forward, we had 1.7 million that we got in revenues. Really. 1.7 million we got in revenues. we expect, given that we are getting the quarry approval to go forward, this is the projected income from the quarry. We are also, we have on record a grant of $100 million that's committed to us. Is 100 million US? Yeah, that's committed to us. And therefore, we're putting this also on the table in terms of all that we can see coming in, and these are our expenditures. And that comes as a whole picture in the budget. When you put that as a whole picture, and Tobagonians know about that, you think you could send that to Trinidad and it's easily refuted, where they say they're not allowing the grant or something like that? Because you really have shared with the whole of Tobago the whole picture. But you can't just be presenting what you want to get from Trinidad, and in the corner you're dealing with $100 million grant that you really have not shared as a whole picture of what your budget is going forward for the next year. Additionally, we kind of throwing out the word, autonomy. The budget has not accounted for, the expectation that is where we are going.
Right.
So you've not seen any line item for legal fees or meetings or anything that's dealing with the autonomy issue. So it's almost an expectation that we're really not going to get it, but we're just mentioning it, just to say that we did. So that also is a challenge. So I really think they could have done more in presenting a whole picture, not just the 1.7 million they got, but what are the projections, because that is what the government does. The government says, well, we expect the oil to come in at this amount. We are pegging the budget at this amount. But we are also going to take loans of X amount so we can meet what will adequately take care of the country. That is your role in the T.H.A. also. You said 7% is what we need. And so whilst you're presenting, you're going to say, well, I intend to get 5.9% from the government, but I also intend to either borrow or I'm getting this grant or whatever.
Right.
Paint the whole picture for us, the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent. Your responsibility is to paint the picture for us and show us how you're going to take us from here into prosperity. And we're not seeing that. We're just seeing the hodgepodge of things, okay, with this. But it doesn't align with the challenges that we have. One of the other things that we need to ensure is that we're really preparing ourselves for what we call high-value export services. That has to come into play. And I'm not seeing that anywhere. In those
and it's
areas.
so unfortunate that my director is telling me that we have to wrap up because of our time. But I'm
such an exciting
because the questions, even with that export again, we talk a lot about what we can do, we should do, but we are still boxed in by the rules of the government.
No, we're not.
Even with some things, because even to export again, and I remember even on Youth Wednesdays, which was yesterday, the youth brought up that topic, and having Tobagonians to have to go to Trinidad to get their food tested to make sure it's export worthy, and all of these little things that someone may say, well, it's just a boat ride away, it's a plane away. If you're serious, you will do it. So, it may not be as easy for some people or convenient, while in Trinidad, it's there. But I would add...
No, but let me add to that. There's an issue of supply and demand.
Right.
You cannot expect Kariri to come and put a whole center here just for the 3 people who want to go and who are export ready.
Yes.
So we have to get our people to Trinidad. When Kariri sees, my goodness, is over 500 people coming from Tobago.
We should open an office.
We should open an office.
Yes. Yeah. So we have to bring this conversation to an end. There's a lot to say, a lot to explore. I know you two in your circles, your social circles, are also still talking about the budget, how you feel about it, and waiting anxiously to see, what Tobago will actually get from the new government that is sitting as a central government. So thank you, Dr. Angus, for sharing with us. It's always a pleasure, as I mentioned, to have you with us.
Thank you. Let me just put in a plug for the Calder Hall community, the Eric Hubble Memorial Group where they're celebrating Everett Covell, and today they
Yes.
actually have a health fair. Yes. So come in and get your checkup. Get your checkup between 8 and 2 p.m. at the Calder Hall Multipurpose Complex.
All right, so that's going on right
Come
now.
in.
So viewers, we go for a quick break. When we return, we have some other very important guests who will be sharing their philosophies. And yes, it's election, but who and when and why? Stay tuned and you'll find out.